Okay, I would like to call the Monday, October 28th Addison Central Board meeting to order. The current time is 6:30. As our normal course of action, I'd like to start out with introductions, which will be echoed. Matt, could you start us off?
Matt Carenti, Director of Finance and Operations.
Steve Orzek.
Justin Chance.
Mary Heather Noble.
Brian Bauer.
Ellen Millen-Weiss.
Laura Hartman.
Wendy Baker.
Barbara Wilson.
Jamie McCallum.
Joanna Doria.
Trisha Allen.
Chip Malcolm.
Suzanne Buck.
Okay, excellent. And there's still no one else on. Okay. At this time, I'd like a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved. I'll second.
Okay? And if there is no objection, I would like to approve the agenda as warned. Next is our first public period, comment period. There's no public in the room, and is there any public online?
Emily.
Emily, okay. If there's anyone that would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand. Seeing none, we can move on to the next agenda item, which is a recommendation to approve minutes of October 14th, 2024. Can I have a motion?
Move that we approve the minutes of October 14th, 2024.
And Jamie seconded. Any discussion? Okay, if there's no objection, the meeting minutes are approved as warned. Next is approval of the ACSD bills, and I'll turn it over to Chip.
There was one set of bills since our last meeting that were read today by Jason and myself. There were two salary payrolls. First one for $720,910.96, and the second payroll.
Sorry, Chip.
was-
Do you mind repeating that, please?
$720,910.96.
Thank you.
The second one was $279,792.24. And the third was the general fund warrant, which was $1,601,752. Again, breaking out the bigger parts of that, student transportation was $155,000. These are gross numbers, just to give you $732. There was both VHE and dental VHE, $611,789, and VisBit, $424,822. So that makes up a large part of that $1,600,000. Make a motion, we approve the bills as read.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? If there's no objection, the bills are approved as reported by Chip. Moving on, we have reported the student representatives. They're not here tonight, so we'll continue on. Which brings us to report of the superintendent.
So under personnel appointments and resignations, I just have one to bring your attention to. The first one is a change for Gail Leach, who is currently listed as a Human Resources Coordinator. It changes her to a title of Human Resources Director. That concludes our analysis of district office responsibilities and FSLA compliance and making sure that everybody's in the right titles in the right places for the things that they do. Gail operates with a fair amount of authority in her work. I think that has come into its own, certainly as the superintendent transitions have taken place, and she should be. You should have a human resources office that has a level of professionalism. I think that is important in this respect. So this is really a recognition of work she's already doing with an appropriate title. It comes with a small raise in pay. But I just wanted to point that one out because we don't have a position of human resources director. So this essentially kind of creates that, and I want to make sure that you're aware of that. That's why it's there.
Could I have a motion? Thank you, Suzanne.
I'll move to accept under personal appointments, changing Gail Leach's job from Human Resources Coordinator to Human Resources Director, and appointing Abigail Sessions a paraprofessional, .2 FTE.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion?
And Dr. Baker, is the job title change strictly job title, or are there any other changes that go along with that as far as salary, whatever?
She has a small raise,
Right.
And her job description will also be rewritten in order to accommodate the things that she has been doing that have not necessarily been covered in that respect. So we're going to work on that, and we wanted to make sure she was recognized with the title, and we can conclude kind of this part of the district office work over the last 5 months.
So change, but nothing earth-shaking.
No, I think, it's really about sort of level of authority. She is counted on in order to implement the master agreement. The things that the superintendent is called to do come to her first, and she researches what the past practice has been, and we're trying to really build better consistency, trying to make sure that what we're doing is always FSLA compliant, and that the bargaining units are, those expectations are done clearly and consistently, and she's really done a remarkable job in trying to get us to this place, and so that change in title reflects that, and her job description will have those pieces more formally stated.
Hasn't she been part of this for years and years and years?
She has. She's been here at Addison Central for
8?
Yeah, a long time.
That's well established.
Yeah, very much so. I think she's done a number of things during that process, but she really has been of good service to the district in this regard.
I remember her when I was still teaching.
Nice, nice. Yeah, yep.
Jamie?
And the para appointment is non-union because
It's a very small FTE.
it's just the zero, yeah, okay. And what is the threshold?
0.4.
What is it?
0.4.
0.4.
Yeah.
Okay, I kind of forgot that, okay, thanks.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, I'm going to just do a vote on this one. All those in favor of approving the change for Gail Leach and the appointment of Abigail Session, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Yep.
Okay,
As
thank
per
you.
usual.
The appointment and change has been approved. Next is the budget development update
Yeah.
presentation.
So Matt has the wheel relative to that. Tonight, it marks our third installment of just kind of just thinking about budget topics as they relate in part to the fiscal year we're in as we get ready to move into the next fiscal year. The only goal that you've identified, really for us to nail home this year relative to the governance standards is around equitable distribution of resources. And so this kind of continues that conversation around that, which I think you'll find both informative and something that we can continue to build on as we're continuing these conversations.
Thanks. All right. So I'm gonna sit here so I can drive and talk to everybody. Feels like more of a sitting layout that we have here anyways. Block the screen. So, as Dr. Baker said, this is the third budget conversation. What we're talking about tonight is, again, we're setting the scene for the FY26 budget development process. We're doing that in a couple of different ways. We're going to look at what's going on in the FY25 budget, sort of a refresher of the architecture and the components and the relative sizes of FY25. We're going to look at some district data, which is a unit costing example, and members of the finance committee will have seen this price tagging exercise where we sort of take different parts of our budget and break it all the way down to what it costs per student. Not equalized pupil for once, we're just talking about our actual students in this example tonight. And then at the very end, we're going to look at some next steps, and we're going to look at some of the decision making around where we're going to go with all of the great feedback that we've collected from the survey and from the listening sessions. So that's the game plan. So what are the major components of the ACSD budget? Here's our 10 general fund cost centers in the FY25 budget. Starting from the top, general ed, student services, universal pre-K. I try not to do too many acronyms, but if there's ever an acronym that you don't know, just let me know and I'll try to translate. PHCC is the vocational tuition that we pay for high school kids to attend the Hannaford Career Center. Transportation is next, so that's just the cost associated with home to school busing. Facilities, tech, board and administration, professional development and curriculum, and debt. Our budget is also made up of multiple funds, and so the general fund is the one that we talk about the most because it's where the most construction happens, where the most change happens, it's where the most expense happens. It's also the one that's directly linked to our district taxpayers. Our district taxpayers generate taxes that goes to the state ed fund. The state ed fund funds our education spending, which composes a large portion of the general fund. It's also where the census block grant and some of the other state grants live. In addition to the general fund, we have our federal grants, IDEA and title funds, and until recently this is where ESSER would have fit in. We have Medicaid and MAC, which are grants that are through the state. Then we have a few other small grants that we call special funds because none of them are in and of themselves a breakout category. In addition to our general fund and our federal grants, Medicaid and special funds, we have food service. Food service is one that hasn't traditionally done a very good job of being shown on the budget because it's typically just a reimbursable cost center. We take on expenses to generate food service for our kids. The state and federal government pays us back through a variety of different reimbursement mechanisms. Sometimes they don't pay us back for every dollar that we spend, and that difference is what's covered by the general fund. And so that's where you see sort of a combination that goes into food service. And then we have our reserves, and I just put the current balance of the education and capital reserves on for a reference point.
Matt, that food service number, is
Yeah.
that the actual cost for the year, or is that the gap between spending and reimbursement?
No, that's the actual cost, not the...
I'm trying to get an idea of scale here.
So if we look on the green disc here, that's all of our general fund revenue. So where's the money coming from? You can see the biggest portion of the green disc is state funding. That's our ed fund payment. Teeny tiny bit of federal funding. State restricted is grant money that comes with certain conditions for how it can be spent. And then we have some of those local other grants. On the other funds revenues, local funding, I think I broke it all out here. Okay, here we go. So the other restricted would be Medicaid and small grants. State restricted is the food service matching. Federal restricted is IDEA B and title. Local is where we're bringing in revenue from the fund balance transfer. That's a big one that exists as both a revenue and an expense. And from small things like sales of food to adults and to kids. Other is where we have transfers between funds, and then we have universal meals and federal food service reimbursements as the state and federal components of the other funds revenue.
It might be just interesting to point out that each one of those sources of money has restrictions with it and expectations for reporting and tracking and management. So our fiscal team is the size it is in part because all of that is necessary, as well as our student services administrator and so on and so forth, our Medicaid clerk. So it's worth pointing out that when you take in a stream of money, there is an expense side that goes along with that, which is part of the administrative budget that fits under the board.
Medicaid's a great example because it's a reimbursement for services model where the more you can figure out how to claim reimbursement for, the more revenue you bring in. And we have a wonderful Medicaid clerk who's a Medicaid funded employee, and so it's we're making an investment in the revenue that she's generating to pay her salary and benefits every year. But the benefit to the district is tremendous, and it's one of those positions that districts who don't have as part of their team are always sort of saying, all right, well, we're kind of leaving money on the table, but we don't have anybody to do all of this really intensive reimbursement work to get Medicaid revenue to come in. The next donut is enrollment. So this is sort of a weighted chart showing the different portions of our LTW ADM from each one of the different types of weight. So we get about 70% of our weight from enrollment, and that's the average daily membership part. And then we have our next biggest chunk coming in from students living at or below the federal poverty line, or at 118% of the federal poverty line. We get additional 9% of our weight from which grade level students are in. So middle school and high school kids get weight above 1.0. Elementary kids are all at 1, and then pre-K kids, because they don't attend for the whole day, are I think a 0.46 per pupil. We also get a little bit from our English language learners and from our status as a sparsity district. And so that's where all of our weight comes in. And here we're seeing all of our different age bands, pre-K, K5, 6-8, and 9-12, and what the average daily membership, which again is a function of average enrollment, looks like. It's a 3-year average. And so in FY23 we had 1,717. In 24, our ADM was 1,690, and we're projected to see a 4% increase in ADM this year. The reason for that seems to be that we're seeing a little bit of a bump in that larger grade band as some of the larger class sizes make their way onto high school, which is that 16% increase that you can see represented there. That's also a good thing because high school kids earn extra weight for being older, and that's here. So we're cautious to remember that this is a number that is not generated by us. It's generated by AOE, hopefully using this data or data that's just like it. But that'll come out around December 15th. I think last year it went through 3 or 4 different revisions before it became the frozen LTWADM, which then becomes what goes into the tax calculation. However, we're going to speculate a little bit here and take a look at where we might wind up. And so here on the far left are the criteria. We can see the ADM and then additional weight for grade level, for FRL or FPL, for English language learners, for sparsity. We don't get anything for small schools. I won't get into that can of worms right now. And then the black and orange squares show what a projection for ADM could look like if we were to take what we think we're looking at for existing poverty and English language learner data. Last year we had kind of an anomaly in the system where some of our free and reduced lunch and direct certification data didn't get uploaded into the database until after this number had come out, and realizing that, we knew that we were sort of underreported on what we got credit for in direct certification. Right now we're seeing a projection of about 34% increase in direct cert and English language learner identification. Those are 2 of the highest weight classes of all of the different additional weights that get added, and are major drivers in projecting on the low end a 2% and on the high end an 8% increase in our LTWADM. We're not going to talk too much about the calculation past LTWATM, which would ultimately be tax rate. We're not going to get into that today, but it is going to be important to remember as we move forward that we are seeing our enrollment number trending in an upward direction, which is going to be a helpful denominator when we're trying to control our tax rate later on. Okay.
Matt, so the understatement for last year, is there any revision that the state does for that, or?
Unfortunately, no. Yeah,
That's
it was,
what I figured your answer was going to be.
yeah,
Unfortunately, but I had to ask.
This next slide takes a look at our 2 biggest drivers, which, on a year-to-year basis seems like a safe bet that those are going to be salary increases and the growth in healthcare. At the time that this slide was constructed, we were predicting, I think, a 16 or 17% increase in healthcare, which was similar to what we wound up with in FY25. That is combined with the data generated from our new master agreements and from sort of a similar cost of living increase within the non-union part of the payroll. And so all things considered, that generated about $2.4 million of new dollars that will exist in the FY26 spending plan just because of those 2 major drivers. And those are the 2 big ones.
So this was calculated with the 16%
Heck,
healthcare?
are you going to let me say the punchline? Or do
Oh,
you want to
okay.
Yeah.
She's gonna give us some good news.
Steve says, I know this one.
I know this answer. It's really good news.
So don't I, Steve.
Really good news. I was in a showroom meeting with Dr. Baker and LaShawn the other day, and I got the email that said our percentage is 11.9 this year. So, as exciting as it is to be getting another double-digit increase in healthcare costs, it's not 16 or 17 or 20 or 25. So that's going to be
I'll take it.
a little bit of breathing room, a little bit of weight off. It could have gone either way, and we're glad that it came in closer to 10 than 20. So 11.9 is the new number. That will bring this $2.4 million down. That's the number you had, right?
Yes.
The next thing that we're looking at here is, at this time in the budget development, is sorting out priorities. I know that, when we're developing a spending plan as an administration and board, there are a lot of things that feel like they rise to the top of the pile. and are the top priority. And that was certainly something that we saw in all the feedback that we got from the budget survey and from the listening sessions. People who represented each one of these three major positions that I just threw on here as an example, and probably an additional 4 to 6 more offshoots or similar versions to these three. So there's no right answer, and I think that one of the things that we're going to hear a lot during our budget development process is that there are oftentimes multiple right answers. And as we set our sights on planning for FY26, it's just going to be important to think about prioritization in planning, and what matters most and what we can reasonably do to accommodate all of the most major priorities and optimize our spending for everybody involved. So this next part is where we're going to take this total general fund budget and start breaking it down into cost per pupil. This is an exercise that was largely instrumental, or a big part of the Edunomics workshop that Courtney, Nicole, and I went to in Georgetown, and it does serve as a really important tool for budgeting, because at the end of the day, big numbers are hard to deal with, right? And so when we're talking about things in millions or tens of millions of dollars, it becomes really hard to track those all the way down to what's going on at the individual student level. It becomes really hard to make good choices between options and to look at cost equivalence when we're talking about really big numbers. And it serves as a tool for sort of unearthing inequity or helping to create equity in areas where otherwise it might not have popped out at you, because when you're looking at something as a list of comparable costs per student, it's pretty easy to see what costs more than what. So with that said, total expenses, this is including all of our funds, are about $50 million. Of that, 48, or 40, close to 49 are our general fund. That's again including the fund balance transfer of 2.3 million. If we take that final number, that 46,875, and divide it by 1650, this is the number of our elementary school students plus pre-K. We're using the pre-K kids because they are revenue generators, and we want to make sure that we're counting everybody who is an ACSD revenue generating pupil in this exercise. That breaks down to $28,410 per student. I put LTW-ADM in here because that's what the state would be using if we were to be talking about our district tax rate. We're not, but that's just what it is as a reference point. So, how does that number, 28,000, break down across all of our cost centers? The first thing we did is we took all the benefits out, whether you're facilities, you work in the central office, you're a teacher, you're a para, everybody's health care, FICA tax, child care tax, retirement, everything sums up to about $9.5 million. So if you divide that by the 1,650 students, that means each student is responsible, out of their 28, for $57.85 towards employee benefits, just benefits. Now it's important to remember that as we move forward in the presentation, you're going to see salary numbers, and that's just salary because we already got the benefits out of the way. So that's an important thing when we're looking at some of the unit pricing of different salary bands within the district, is to remember that all the benefits, all $9.5 million, are backed out. Here's the breakdown of how benefits expenses look, and unsurprisingly, healthcare is the big one. Indirect instruction our K through 5 teacher salary, our art, movement, and Spanish teacher salary, salary for all of our librarians, salary for all of our 6 through 12 teachers, all of our school-based administrators. These are the people who are working in the schools. Salary of all of our general ed paraprofessionals. All sums to $12.2 million. That number, prorated across all of our students, is about $7,400. And so we've paid for benefits, we've paid for the instructional staff members of the school. We also have support staff members in each school, and that looks something like administrative assistants, the school nurse. This salary is based on the EQS allotment, not the total allotment. Same with counselors. And then ancillary positions like family engagement or administrator on assignment. We have a few that didn't really fit in any other bucket. The sum there breaks down to another $1,100 per student. In pre-K, we have teachers and paras, and add another $292 per student. This presentation will be refreshed. It's available now on board pack. There's a couple of changes, so the new one will be available soon. In direct instruction, everything that's non-personnel, including things like professional services, rentals, activities, transport, general supplies, books and periodicals, equipment, dues and fees, breaks down to $1,080 per student. Here's kind of what that looks like by account. So this is, again, everything that is in direct instruction, but not a salary or benefit. And then next, here's our school-by-school breakdown of enrollment. 1594 is a number not including pre-K, and here's how it looks across all of our school buildings. Here's the instructional staff, and remember the instructional staff was on that first slide. That's principals, classroom teachers, specialist teachers, librarians, and general ed paras. Here's the number, 167 total, not including pre-K because we're not counting their enrollment in this slide, so we didn't count their instructional staff in the other one. And then here's the ratio of students to instructional staff. So you can see as we get older, we're seeing more students per instructional staff. You can see a range of different ratios across our elementary programs. If we add everybody in, all educational staff, we are now adding activities directors, pre-K teachers, pre-K paras, counselors, nurses, and admin assists. We're still not adding anything from student services. The numbers go up, and then the ratios go down because we've added more adults, but you can see a similar gradient across the 9 buildings. Pre-K enrollment is added here because we counted the teachers and paras.
Jamie?
One quick question, Matt.
Sure.
The last few slides you showed, are they related to the stuff we talked about a few weeks ago about comparability?
Yeah, this is from that presentation.
This is from that. Okay.
Yeah, I just plugged them into the quilt here. But,
The quilt motif. Okay. Okay, great.
Matt, if you go back one slide, I think one of the things that's important to recognize when looking at MUMS and MUHS, you know, you've seen how the course loads are different. Remember that MUHS has students that are going to Career Center for part of the day, and not all 11th and 12th graders are required to be on campus all the time. So that's a little bit skewed in that way, in that I think he's taken all of the 530 kids that are in MUMS and divided that, but they're not all there all the time.
yeah, if we added the FTE of teachers who were assigned to our 11th and 12th graders at Hannaford, that would drop the high school's number significantly. The last quilt thing that we did here was to just look at teacher salary at each school as relative to the number of students at the school. And it's important to note that this is a two variable calculation. So teacher seniority would represent higher wages, and then student density or student enrollment would affect the number too. So it's not just that we have old teachers at Ripton and younger teachers at MUMS, but a combination of both enrollment and seniority in that gradient. And as they would say at Egenomics, it certainly does not indicate prioritization of elementary school teachers, that we value them and want to pay them $3,000 more per student than we pay our middle school teachers. Right.
Steve?
So this slide confuses me a little. If we're doing the salary per student, shouldn't we be using like a standard number? Take all the salaries and divide it by the number of teachers, because it's not, it's not the particular school's fault. Like Mary Hogan has all the senior teachers, and so we penalize them, or Ripton has all the senior teachers and penalize them because it looks like their numbers are really expensive, but it really shouldn't be that way. It should be even, shouldn't it? I mean,
I don't think that there's any penalization here at all. I think it's really just meant to show that there are two variables that contribute to this calculation. It's enrollment, but it's also seniority, in that we have, schools where, we have more senior staffs than in others.
And it's actually enrollment that is the trend here. So if you look at Mary Hogan, MUMS, and MUHS, right, those are schools that operate at scale. They're all within a relative range. As a matter of fact, MUMS has the largest student-to-teacher ratio of the three buildings. And then when you look at the rest, they're all within a fairly comparable range. Cornwall is the largest of our smaller schools, so it makes sense that they are they have the most favorable ratio in that sense. So it's really a factor of enrollment. What's interesting to me about this slide is how similar Shoreham, Salisbury, Bridport, Ripton, and really Weybridge actually are. In that sense, there's not a, when you look at them together, it doesn't look like there's a dramatic difference. So I think if we used a financial model, it probably wouldn't skew this that much, in that respect. It's an interesting point, though.
Ellie?
Steve, I just want to point out earlier, we did get that number, it was the 7,423,
Right.
which was it equally distributed.
right.
So each student.
We're going into professional development and curriculum next, and here we can see we have two expenses. Master agreement professional development tuition funds dispersed in FY24. There's a little bit of discrepancy between the 2 years, so I took the average, about $120,000 that we spend every year on reimbursing tuition to staff members for their professional development. We spend almost the same amount in expenses for training employees at ACSD. And then the personnel who are held in the professional development and curriculum budget currently, there's a portion of the director of teaching and learning, half of an administrative assistant, data manager, curriculum coordinators, 4.0, one of which is 1.5 are grant funded, and then 2 ELL teachers. The total budget, obviously the benefits are still backed out, comes out to $451 per student.
Even with benefits, we're spending $600,000 less on professional development than we are food service. It's just kind of an interesting point.
Matt, quick question there. Does the 1.5 grant funded, is that removed from the total, or are all 4 curriculum coordinators in that total?
That is not included because we're just looking at general fund right now, so that would stack on top.
Okay, thanks.
In student services, we have special education, and then we have additional student supports, which are based on individual needs. Special ed would be tied to an IEP, but not all student services expenses are special ed. So the top line here is our revised student services budget, which includes additional expenses associated with the ACP programs, as we discussed during the last budget presentation. If we take the entire portion of the budget that's related to IEP services, otherwise known as the special ed budget, that's that 6.5 million. And then we have an additional portion of non-IEP services. That's largely intervention and some of the additional FTEs of nurse and guidance that don't get included in the EQS. Student Services receives the Census Block Grant, and that it was interesting to me to sort of take a look at how much of Student Services revenue, or how much does Student Services revenue offset all of the expenses that we incur to provide services to our students. And that winds up being 42%. So 42% of student services costs are covered by student services, offsetting revenues. After that, taken as a whole, $4,250 per student gets spent on student services. In transportation,
Yeah, 4,250 per student receiving student services, or all students in the district?
All students. Yep. Good question.
That's
And
part
that
of
is the general
26,000.
fund component, Matt?
General fund component.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Busing. So we have about 1.4 million spent on our buses. That's 19 bus routes that we run at a cost of about $70,000 per route. That is 882 spread across every student. We know that every student doesn't take the bus, and so if we were to think about a more realistic ridership-based calculation, we can assume, this is generous, I think, but 2/3 of our students ride the bus, and that number jumps to $1,300 per student. I put the out-of-district transportation cost per student because it just points to a stark contrast between what we would spend, to put a kid on a bus versus the some of the obligation to take kids to different programs, out of district or outside the county. So this is facilities and technology on our next section. We started with tech here. Just a quick breakdown of where that budget goes. Tech and facilities have a similar makeup, where you can see that there's that blue chunk that represents salary between 36 and 41%. But they're largely composed of non-personnel costs. So in tech, copiers, internet, software, hardware, and supplies are our big expense categories. We spend $734 per student. In facilities, our big categories are repairs and maintenance, supplies and equipment, and utilities and landscaping. We also spend a small amount on vehicles and vehicle maintenance and furniture and fixtures. That's $2,389 per student. In the district office, we have three major categories within the district office. There's the school board's budget, which you might not have even known you had. The district administration, and then the fiscal services or finance team. The right column stacks all of them together, but the school board budget is largely composed of the insurance. So that VisBit expense that you mentioned earlier was, the school board just bought insurance for the whole district. Thank you. And,
You're welcome.
there's a little legal band in there, and not enough salary. And then on the district administration side, we have largely salary. We have a major contingency fund, which we calibrate to about 1% of the general fund to hold against unexpected costs. And then there's a central office or district office supply line in there. The finance team is largely salary, with a little bit of subscriptions as well. Hard to see from far away. The total budget's $2.6 million. It's about 1,220 per student. I think that the cost per student of that gray box, that contingency fund, is about 220 or 270 per student, and so taking that out puts it down right around 1,000 for this cost center. UPK came in a little bit under budget last year. We are trying to figure out why, other than, I think the projection might have been that we were going to see more pre-K enrollment than we did. We are planning to move our share of the UPK, because we split it with Mount Abe and Virgins, planning to move that salary and benefits to this cost center. So that would be an 8% increase, but we're 7% under budget, so that might be close to a net. Not that the percentages work that way, but I think it might be close to a net zero here for FY26 if we were to just do that.
Where's that person now?
That person is currently funded through student services. Yeah. But 308 per student is about where the UPK cost center will come in. In food service, as we said earlier, expenses are offset by federal and state revenues before landing in the general fund. You can see, sorry, I have a pregnant wife. Hold your twins. I got told before I came tonight that she was feeling like maybe she was going to have a baby. So I'm do this again. Okay. So.
You have to finish the sprint.
I know. I have like 25 more songs.
You do?
Yeah. The audio book from this meeting will be available for anyone who wants. Okay. Food service is a reimbursement fund. Budgeting relies on FY24 data. So what happened in 24 is going to help influence how we budget in 26, because it skips a year. We don't know what we're going to do until we know what we've done. General fund transfer of $425,000 was this top bar. It's actually looks like I made them the same color. Local revenue. Oh, sorry, that's local revenue here. Federal revenue, and then state. This is the total expense. So this was a big number to see that we were obligated to about $400,000 from the general fund this year in food service. That's higher than it's been, so we're keeping an eye on that to figure out if that's going to be where we're at as a district, or if that was just a high year for some reason. We saw food costs go up. We gave a unscripted dollar raise when we did a side letter to the staff, to food service employees, and I think a lot of that wound up landing in some of this general fund obligation.
An important note in that is that, we're now feeding everybody breakfast and lunch all the time, so the demand on staff is different, and the importance of staff retention as an operational feasibility it's different when you start to go up in scale by that many meals every day. Everything else becomes more expensive, because if you have somebody that if you have to make a lunch for a school that previously served 50 kids, and now they're going to serve 100 kids, you know, that's all of a sudden becomes not something a group of volunteers can take care of. You know, so your costs to make sure that you're properly staffed, you know, they go up. So these are the kinds of things that I think it's sometimes hard to think about when we're thinking about the impact of a wonderfully thought of new approach to some things. And so just want to make sure to point them out as we go.
Juliana?
How is the reimbursement calculated at the state? Like, is it like we fed these many kids lunch, and so then you get that certain amount of money per lunch?
Yeah, it's this weird patchwork of different reimbursements for state, for federal, but yeah, it's largely based around a set reimbursement amount per meal. There's a separate federal milk reimbursement, so we have to track milk. There's specific grants that target fresh fruit and vegetables, local produce, breakfast, lunch, summer food. All of these kind of stitched together to be our revenue stream for
And
food.
who keeps track of all those statistics?
Yeah. Well, Steve when he's not catering, and Kathy and I do. So yeah.
And Matt, the 258 is the gap per student, or is that the total per student?
Total.
Total per student. Yeah.
Total general fund.
Yeah.
So the moment you were all waiting for is how do the price tags add up? And you know, we started with 28,410. Total price tags per enrolled student are 26,858. There's some missing here, and I didn't exhaustively track every dollar, but this gives a pretty good snapshot of where the expenses lie on a per pupil basis across all of our cost centers.
Wait, Ellie?
I just think you answered him, not how Jason was asking. That 258 is just the gap that's not covered by
Just
the
the gap,
reimbursement.
yeah.
Not the whole.
Correct.
Right, that's what we're paying for, and
Yes.
that's being reimbursed for.
Yes.
All right. So there's a few more slides, but I am actually being called to go to hospital. So
Congratulations.
I'm gonna go through the next slides in like 1 second so that you can have a productive conversation when I'm gone.
Matt, we can do this.
Yeah, we
If you wanna
can.
just
We
go.
love
and
Caroline.
just-
Yeah.
I'm just
Slides,
Yeah.
yeah.
don't want
your wife mad
You don't want
So
this.
Nicole, why don't you drive?
Yeah.
and
She'll
we'll
be
go
mad
right
at
from
you
there.
enough, all right?
Thank you, Matt. Good luck. Congratulations.
I knew if I showed up here that.
Good luck,
Okay.
Matt.
We'll have our phones on us, so.
Okay. Wow.
Looks like
I
someone
think
else
you
will
might
drive.
need to.
No,
Yeah.
Jason just shifted.
Jason, do you want to drive?
Yeah,
That's
no,
fine.
let Nicole drive, Jason. That way we'll be here doing this together. So, yeah. Thank you. But,
It's gonna hit the
You
button.
can drive, you can
yeah.
navigate your talk.
So if you go back one, Nicole.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. So we got the price tag. So, so that that is an equity-based budgeting strategy, is to kind of bring things, to the light. And there are lots of other ways that we could be developing cost centers. One of the things that's of interest to me is what are we spending on student safety, for example? Where is our SRO officer? I think that's there. I think, in terms of some of the particular cybersecurity pieces that are in technology, like there are ways to combine costs that I think might be very interesting to us as we move forward. So that's just a thought. If we go to the next part, so really we're obviously thinking about like, okay, what are the strategies that are in the strategic plan that as we move forward are going to have resource implications? And so, just like when you pull in a source of revenue, there are management costs that go along with that. And so these are a few that are highlighted, and they hopefully in our very best efforts won't represent a lot of new costs, but they may represent, I think you can definitely expect to see in FY '26, there'll be some redistribution. So we will start to be looking at, okay, what are we doing now, and how is this strategic plan helping us to shape what we're doing into making sure that we're moving in some of these directions. So there's some of the ones Matt put up there for access. If you keep going, Nicole, I think oh, no. So we can also do that with success.
Right.
That's the triangle, that's the work that the principals are doing right now, actually, and thinking about what are the performance changes for students that we are expecting to see, and in order to get there, what do we need? You know, and how can we do that? Okay. So, that's okay.
They all
Good
come
job.
together.
Well done, I know, that's all right. So these are examples of some equity-based budgeting strategies that are in place now that you were, as I understand it, not necessarily doing previously, previous to this year. So one of them is we're moving away from an index budgeting approach, which most districts have used most of the time. Most businesses use it most of the time as well, and saying, okay, let's go back and build from the bottom up in what's called a zero-based budgeting approach. And then, you know, the data analytics, we're taking a look at what is our data, how are we breaking it out per student, what does that look like in some of the national modeling that Edgenomics has had. I've shared some of that with you, and we'll just kind of keep giving you those things as you know, we're thinking about them. Performance cycles relate to thinking about student data and impact that we're hoping that our resources are making. So when we come to you as we get a little bit later in the budgeting cycle with a spending plan for FY '26, what we'll be saying is, particularly as the principals join us, here are what we're planning to see for impacts of that. And here's what we think this is a 3-year project, right? This is a 2-year project. This might be a 5-year project, but this is what we're looking at. So that way we're gonna begin to track that. And hopefully we're gonna pair that with something that's, you know, kind of an annual opportunity for the board to look very, very closely at data, which some of which would have to be done in executive session because of the numbers in our schools where they're small, so that you're able to see that performance as well and ask those questions as it relates to the way in which our delivery model is using resources. Staffing models are essentially, you know, okay, Matt's done that with you already a little bit relative to the educational quality standards pieces, right? You know, that's a start. This year, as we are budgeting into FY '26, you know, I'm asking the principals in their modeling to hold very tightly to the class size pieces that you have in policy right now. I know those are under revision, but you know, that's regardless of who's taught what grade previously. You know, it's like, well, you need a class between 10 and 20 or 10 and 24. So, you know, let's see that and see what that looks like, and then determine what's the delivery model that's behind that, so that we can work with that well. And then, you know, alternative cost centers are what I'm talking about in terms of, you know, we could certainly be brainstorming what are some other interesting ways to slice the pie that bring different conversations to light that we haven't thought of. For example, Milton School District, who is one of the districts that pulls out student safety, they've actually found a way to identify their hazing, harassment, and bullying costs that relate to keeping kids safe in that respect, that are maybe not as obvious to people who are not in schools all the time. Not that those efforts are always 100%, you know, effective by any means. That's a work in progress. But following Vermont's law has costs associated with it. And Vermont is one of the only states that has bullying as a legal mandate, you know, that we work in. Not that we don't want classrooms to be kind, you know, everywhere, all the time. Vermont just has a very prescriptive way of going about it that has an administrative cost to it, you know, that is a little different. So these are some strategies that are already in place. And Matt actually, pulled out some examples in terms of thinking about what if safety were a cost center. Now, these things are, as you can see on the right-hand column, they are already pulling from other places, where those exist. But essentially, our safety costs are about $350 per student when you aggregate them across all 1,650 students. Mental health was something that the community members really across all sites spoke very highly of, and it was the subject of Nicole's presentation in looking at national trends and things that we're seeing as well. So, this is an example of information that we'll be furnishing to our legislators. Just thinking about, okay, what are we spending and what is that looking like? So right now, total mental health costs per enrolled student are $1,616 as those are figured. So, I don't remember if Matt's got that slide, the LOA at the end again, in terms of thinking about what that compares to.
It's more than transportation.
Thank you, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think this district is definitely doing what the taxpayers value in this area, and as we are looking to sort of make sure that our student services pieces are as streamlined as possible, we'll be looking to be as efficient as we can be, while maintaining strong service, So really, I think.
I do have a quick question
Yeah.
about that. I mean,
Yeah.
to what degree does this number sort of pull away from the amount being spent per student in terms of student services?
Yep, so,
Because that's $42.50 per student.
Yeah.
Well-
So what would that change into then?
So if you look on the right-hand column there, it shows the different accounts that's in. So the first, third, and fifth are all in student services, so you can kind of get a feel
You would
for.
be able to pull that out,
Oh,
pull
yeah,
those numbers
we
out,
certainly
yeah.
could, yep.
about half.
And then you've got,
It's about half of it.
yeah, you have direct instruction in there as well. So non-personnel, counseling costs, it's small. I'm thinking those are contracted services, that relate to some specific pieces.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking of the sort of domino effect that happens to those other numbers that we were previously presented.
Yeah.
I think you would still have direct instruction as first, then you'd have employee benefits, then you'd have student services, even if you took
Oh,
out
yes.
half.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Oh, I
then
would
you'd have
expect so,
mental
yeah.
health.
Yeah.
And mental health would be just under student
Okay.
services as the fourth highest.
Okay.
We
So
probably
thank
could go back to,
I'm sorry,
to the
facilities would be higher than that.
facilities, yeah,
Yeah.
the very first slide even, and sort of stack them up there,
Yeah.
and because you'd want to put food service in there as well
Yeah.
in that
Okay,
respect, so.
thank you.
And safety. Yeah.
Suzanne,
You had
are any of these costs, something that could be billed back to Medicaid or, personal insurance?
I'm not sure to the extent to which those costs have already offsetting revenues, so I'm guessing they do, but, the ones that relate to IEPs would. So there are probably some of those that do, given, Nicole's presentation relative to the rise of that disability category. But we're providing a lot of mental health services to students that are not on IEPs as well.
Right, no, I was thinking of 504 students or ESTs or.
Oh, sorry.
Back to
I'm
that
being-
slide?
yeah.
Yep.
No, actually, this is fine, onward.
But I think this was good. For me to see this broken down this way, it really helps me better understand how we're spending today's budget, right? And especially after reviewing some of the comments and that kind of thing, this is helpful. It gives us really a much better insight on where the money is going. So I really appreciate this.
Yeah.
Mary Heather?
I agree. I think it just makes the whole budget conversation so much more accessible to regular folks.
Yes.
Who are not necessarily financial gurus. One thing I'd like to see.
That's why
Just
it's there.
because it came
Yeah.
up so frequently, and it's come up in the past before is the IB program. And we all know
Yes.
that it's a very small amount of our total budget, but it continues to be a question in the community about how much we're spending on IB. And I think it would be interesting to have that specific data presented as well, even if it is, part of admin costs or instruction costs, if it can somehow be teased out so that there's a way to answer that question, because when we don't answer that question, the perception is that
We're
we're
hiding
being
something.
elusive about it. And the other thing is, there continues to be misunderstanding about what IB actually is. And I think
Yes.
this continued perception that it's only the diploma program and that only a very small percentage of students benefit from that, which
Right.
is not true.
Right.
So I just think it would be nice to have that somehow teased out in this budget conversation.
Well, I think there would be two things that maybe relate to that. One of them is the proprietary fees relative to IB, so that we're able to utilize their consultants, their materials, their research, things of that nature as we're putting together really what is required by law, which is the coordinated curriculum. Our coordinated curriculum is outstanding, and it is widely thought of as much more well-developed than really many, if not any, other districts in the state. So there are very, very, very few places where I could go to Weybridge and talk about the human body there, and then I could go to Ripton and everybody knows what everybody's talking about, and teachers have the support of that, and the sharing of resources around that, so that is a huge equity driver you have that is already in place. So the costs predominantly that go along with IB are actually that. That is, IB was your method of getting to that place. And so I would want to make sure that the board fully understood both of those things, and the public as well, because that is one of those mandates that we fully fund. Our path to do so related to IB. And we could have chosen other paths to do so as well, and that was, our path to do so, but it's a good example of something we do very well.
Just on the same topic, because it came up where I was too, and it's come up over time in different ways. One of the questions was posed wasn't just for the cost of the licensing, whatever we pay to organize and to buy their, or use their material. It was what happens, and it came up a little bit on IB again as to, I don't know how you break this out, the competitive component of IB, like the schedule, okay, that we now have this year, which is different and has changed, and for some it's working okay, for others apparently it's not. But, yeah, and I don't know how you break the cost out of that, but that was a question that came up.
I'm not sure I quite understand the question.
I'm not sure I understood it either,
Okay.
but that was a question that someone had, okay? And I think that started me thinking as to how we answered this question about the greater IB presence. So I guess put it to Caitlin or somebody, because it's not, I don't think it's the case in elementary school, it's mostly in high school.
I think there are, if I'm understanding what I think you're getting at, there are organizational impacts that relate to IB, such as, scheduling at the high school that accommodates the diploma program, requirements around, the 5th grade expositions and the 10th grade expositions and the curricular pieces that go with that, and the amount of time that you have to dedicate in a schedule to ensure that those kinds of things are done. The 6th grade movement to MUM, so that the MYP curriculum was tied together, so that worked well. the fact that, teachers are just simply not able to go and do their own units in their own way, in their own rooms, as they once did, right? Those are all organizational impacts. I'm not sure that in today's budget, they represent, it would be hard to tease out costs with those.
I'm
I
not
know
asking
over
you to
time
tease
they
them
have,
out, but that was a question that
Yep.
I got.
Yep.
We can look at all these others, which are fairly distinguished, in the budget just by a bill or something.
Yeah.
But these were other costs, so that becomes an educational component,
Yes.
even if we can't
Yes.
answer the number.
Yes.
It becomes an agent, that we're aware of that.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
But that may be one of the negatives versus all the positives that we see, as you've explained, as far as curricular stuff.
I think it makes us, in Vermont schools, it's uncomfortable when we organize ourselves around a third-party anything, right? When we say, we're going to do this in this way, and we reorganize ourselves away from the things that we used to do autonomously toward that thing, whether it's a supervisory union to a district, or whether it's something we're moving towards, something of that nature, or a great schools improvement plan, on a K-12 basis. That's, it has with it operational thoughts and that creates discomfort, for sure.
Steve?
So you said, what else do we want to see? I like the opportunity to be able to say, what if you broke the costs out for X? But my question comes from, would this change the base way that we do the budget? For example, we're used to seeing certain cost centers. We're used to seeing certain structures to the budget. If we go through and say, now we're going to do all new cost centers and do it in a different way, I didn't think that's what you were saying.
Yeah.
If these things that you're talking about adding here are a budget and this other way that costs are broken out, that's extremely useful.
Yes,
because
that is the thought.
it does show it in a different light. It does, it does pull all those things together. If you wanted to do an IB, these are the costs of IB, and here's what the PD is, and here's what all this is, and you get to put it all together. But anybody who's a budget purist and says, well, this doesn't look like the budget looked last year, they're still going to want to see
Yeah.
the way that the budget has always been. And so I think that anything that you can do to be additive, to present information in a different light, to answer some of the questions that we saw on those surveys. And I agree. It's clear, as long as we've been doing IB, people still don't understand how that's broken down and what that means. And if we could give them, the school district has never been transparent on how much IB cost. Well, here's your cost center. This shows you right here. Here's your cost center.
Yeah.
This is what you've been asking for.
What Matt and I have talked about is really sort of doing those things in parallel. I mean, our cost centers are built up by Handbook 2, which is required by the Department of Education, so agency of ed. So, that we don't really have a lot of flexibility in a lot of those things. Those are all function and object codes, and we have to report in those ways. But we can say, well, how much did we spend in student safety last year, and how much are we going to plan to do in this year? One of the comments that Jamie and I heard, actually, as we were at our listening session, was a really a very reasonable and thoughtful request that we are really able to say, what does this budget have in it that's going to be important for kids? And, if we're saying things like, well, it's got an increase in this, and this is why this is important for kids, or we've shifted resources from this to that in alignment with the strategic plan and in a way that's going to be important for kids. That's information and these were folks who didn't happen to have kids in the schools at this time, but they wanted to know what their neighbors' kids were going to feel as a result of the spending plan that we put together. And I just thought that was a wonderful way to articulate that. And hopefully this approach to kind of cost centers and price tags is easier for people to understand.
Yes, Ellen. Yeah, I mean, I think that IB and the concerns around IB should be taken seriously on their own, and I think they should also be treated as an indicator of other frustrations, which I think are around transparency. And transparency can feel on both sides like this third rail of frustration for everybody, but I think even what we're talking about tonight is a presentation of really complicated information in a way that's very easy to understand, that hasn't been done before. And so that's part of transparency, right? It's not for lack of sharing, but maybe lack of figuring out the way that information is shared so that lots of people can sit there and say, wow, that's really interesting, and could we cut it this way or that way? And to directly tie it back to kids.
Mhm.
Because when that doesn't happen, and tax rates are going up, and massive culture change is being implemented across 9 schools with a new curriculum, and there are incredibly emotional conversations around closing schools, it's all just gonna trigger a lot of responses that are just like, this doesn't feel understandable, it doesn't feel honest, it doesn't feel transparent. And I think, so again, not to say that IB is only that, but I do think that it's an important indicator of those frustrations and a way that we can be thinking about how we're communicating information more and differently. So, and I don't think it takes care of it, but whether we have an IB cost center or if we're able to just tell more of a story around, this is what it looks like to have a coordinated curriculum. This is what
Exactly.
I might not see as a teacher in this school, as a parent in this school, but the principals see when they get together, and the superintendent sees when she goes to all the buildings. Like, that's really important for us to be talking about and sharing as broadly as we can.
And how kids arrive at mom's, right?
Yeah.
If I could assign you homework, it would be, what are the other pictures that you would find interesting to have painted? And also, what parts of the strategic plan, if you look at the things that in your mind should represent cost shifts or cost increases, assuming that we've got other areas where we can do some offsetting, as they tie to the strategic plan, what would those be? Because I can imagine what they might be, and we'll get to that place in the budget building process, but I think it's important for everybody to be thinking about that so that we can have a productive dialogue around that, since I wasn't here when you were having maybe some of those other conversations. Yeah. So, anything, Nicole, or Courtney, from the equity-based budgeting work that you've been doing? That's an ongoing class, by the way. It's not just, when they went down in September, so that you want to add?
Each week has a theme, so last week was all about federal grants and how they're used either in IDEA or consolidated federal programs. I think my biggest takeaway, which Matt already said, he's tried to implement some of that in his presentation, is that around the country, boards are looking at different options. And I think in the middle of this presentation, there was like a multi-shaded quilt.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Matt was trying to say, here are all the things, and there's no one right way to go. But with this much money, there's priorities to be set. And how do you want to set those?
That was the budget priority slide you're talking about with the 3 columns?
Yes.
Joanna's on it right now.
Yeah, that one, yeah.
Like a way to organize.
Yeah, I found that one
Yeah.
pretty interesting, but I didn't, sorry to interrupt you. So.
No.
No, I found it interesting, and I didn't quite understand it at first. Those priorities are from our strategic plan, right? And so what is the point of laying it out like this?
They're not actually, I think, from our strategic plan necessarily.
Strategic plan is one of them.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of like.
What is this?
Spending, I would say
So-
educational
Okay.
outcomes and strategic plans are almost.
Right, okay.
There you go.
So
Yeah.
So
when-
what is the point of this organization?
How
I know
you
it's
can-
3 different ways,
With
right?
priorities.
Right. So he had said these are 3 out of what could be a whole lot of different priorities that we as a board hold for our budget.
Okay.
And so this is just demonstrating the order in which those priorities fall. Could be any number of ways.
I will say in the finance, I'm sorry. in the-
That's what I was
yeah.
gonna say.
Oh, go
When
for
he
it.
presented it in the finance committee, he said he picked these, but like there could be any. You could have 10 things up there. There could be any. These could be any
Okay,
priorities.
okay.
But these were ones he put up as illustration purposes.
The other thing is our strategic plan covers a lot, but
Yeah.
as far as like educational outcomes,
Right,
obviously,
right.
and also there's language in there that ties back to budget, you know, with being in like a cost efficient way and without, you know, basically, so there's an element of this that I think, and Matt acknowledged this too in the finance committee, it looks neat and tidy and it's not, they're incredibly interdependent.
Right.
One kind of envelops most of them, but not all of them,
Yeah,
and so
right.
it's sort of, it's a thought exercise. I mean, not that we shouldn't have priorities, but I think some of this is a thought exercise.
Just historically, there's a number of differences. Number one, we didn't have a strategic plan in place last year,
No, we
okay?
didn't.
Number two, we had all that governmental stuff, and so the spending and tax target type approach of the many was a really important part of our top limit. And everything else sort of fell in under it. So this year we have a little different background, including the strategic plan. So, you know, it then becomes not necessarily easier, but it is hopefully more settled this year than it was last year.
And isn't educational outcomes really part of strategic plan implementation?
It's part of your success
Yes.
piece,
Yeah.
you know, specifically. I mean, I guess you could argue everything we do relates to an educational outcome, including our facilities budget, but I think.
Either up or down.
Right, exactly, but if we're thinking about it, you know, if you think of the educational outcomes relative to your success goal, that's the cleanest batch, you know, then you also have, you know, development of cultural competence and culturally competent curricular offerings, and you have, right, I mean, there's a lot there that we could take any aspect of that strategic plan and we could put a price tag with that, you know, and I think we could also, if we were to increase some of the things in your strategic plan, the way that you've outlined, they might result in decreased price tags, you know, so it's not that everything always goes up, you know, it's often how you're using, you know, the funds, you know, so, this whole presentation was designed to sort of help you with that mindset. The next time we're together, whether we have Matt or not, the hope is that, you know, we'll be able to begin to set maybe a financial feasibility target so that then, you know, obviously one of the things we heard from taxpayers is you know, significant increases in taxes are really not something they feel comfortable with. So from your perspective, what is a feasibility target that then we from the administrative end need to work to back into, you know, and how can we begin to do that and then come back to you with some thinking around that? I imagine we'll get to a spending plan, if you will, where the principals come and tell you their work, you know, and what that looks like, and we've got more of a clear, now this budget, here's the target, you know, here's the plan, here's the tax rate, and then here's what we think this is gonna do for kids. That's probably January, that's probably the first meeting in January, because the principals need some time to do that work. You know, it's asking much more of them, I think, than happens in an index budgeting situation, so they need some time to do that and to do it well.
Ryan?
Yeah, I would like included in what you've just said, how that's gonna be validated. Because I don't wanna be providing money. Oh, well, this may happen. No. We need to know it's either gonna happen. If it doesn't, it may need to be changed or canceled.
Yep. I don't have anything else unless there's.
Did you want to speak more to the community survey results, or?
I would say, I mean, I definitely don't wanna speak for Matt, but we talked in the finance committee a lot about how that's a lot of information to take in, and then sort of brainstormed around presenting the raw data to, not presenting like to walk through it, but for the board to absorb, and then I think Matt was planning to present more on his and Emily's kind of analysis of that information and breaking it down. I don't know if that's.
Emily was there, and yeah, we spent quite a bit of time on this, actually. Emily was there and had looked at it all and tried to put it into
Themes.
themes, not categories, but themes. And as Matt pointed out, which I thought was an interesting, it isn't just the question or the comment, it was the emotion behind the question or the comment. which you couldn't get by just taking that particular statement and putting it in a theme. So that was part of our concerns with, all of us should read that. I read it over quickly, and I think it's helpful to have that, because there is that emotional component and there is the actual black and white sort of, you gotta do this, or it's 6 words or something like that. So,
And then they don't need to collapse all of that into one slide. That was sort of the.
So
how to do that
I
at the end
think,
of a big
I
presentation.
think it was helpful, I found it helpful to read it all. At least I haven't digested it all, but I read it. And I think that helps me gather a little of the emotional component, which the IB part was one of those. Not just from my own personal time at the school, but it also, at the place I was, but also the comments that came up across the board.
So the next step that we have around that is, the association and I are working on ways to enable the staff, licensed and non-licensed staff, to just be able to have some engagement as well, that looks similar but is a survey that's designed for staff. So that, I will be having 2 kind of, drop-in sessions, virtual drop-in sessions for people to just kind of come in and share some thinking, and then also just discuss that from an employee base. So we'll have some of that information. Many, particularly some of the town clerks, really appreciated this opportunity and would be very happy to be very helpful if we were to want to do that again, in the process. I think, the first time you do anything, right, it's like, wait a minute, what's this? And how have we done this? But then, once people realize, hey, this is actually pretty neat, then there you get more people that are helping to organize those things with more lead time and things like that. So we may even do it again. This is just kind of where we are right now and what we've collected. And so we pulled in 3 or 4% of the voter base in your last vote,
Which is more than
good. It's not
we
too bad.
voted last year.
That's not too bad. That's for sure.
I just want to follow up on that. I think obviously it was a very, certainly the survey itself was a very useful tool to try to extract some information. And I think the meetings themselves probably not as well attended as we had hoped. And some of that is just the amount of lead time and the way that people, plan their weeks well in advance. And I think there's some lessons learned about how to approach that maybe next year. But I think the information is very useful, and I guess my hope is that we do actively engage with these responses in a way that, or if there's a way, and I don't know if it's the finance committee or Emily in district office, to try to tease out the issues rather than the positions, because I think we're seeing a lot of positions being presented to us, and I think we have to be very cautious about writing down positions and then counting up tallies for the positions. I think we really need to focus on the issues. And so the issues that, I was seeing when I was reviewing some of this are the specific learning environments and student support and consistency and, not having disruption in class. And in addition to cost and, keeping taxes affordable. So I think if there's a way that we can translate this, if you will, to those issues and then figure out ways for us to be able to present some of these, alternative budget pictures, like you said, Dr. Baker, to answer some of those questions, like the IB specific, here's what we're spending on that. Here's how much of that is legally required. So that some of these questions can be answered. But I do think we need to be able to answer and respond to some of these issues that are consistently being brought up, like cost, like school classroom environment and class size and all of those things. And I think one of the things that I would like to see moving forward as we're budgeting is, what does it look like if we play around with class size and what are the options that we have, because I think those are some of the issues that are coming up. So I don't know how exactly to get there, but I think this is really important, a really important start to a meaningful conversation.
Brian and then Ellen.
The school that I attended was Shoreham, and I was expecting a large crowd. The tables were set out, or the chairs were, and I think we had 4 to 5 people. But the reason that we had 4 to 5 people came out. One of the persons that attended said, "I just found out about this about an hour ago," and all I've heard was we're going to disseminate this idea that it's going to be these meetings, and then somebody tells me they found out about an hour ago. The other thing is that they didn't necessarily enjoy the fact that it was at dinner time. You know, that people come from work and they're trying to eat, and this meeting is starting and continuing. The other thing that struck me is I would much prefer listening to the 5 people that were there than to have 20 people, because I really learned quite a bit about what their frustrations were and what their suggestions were. And it you know, I was, well, do I really want to go? And I said, okay, I'll do it. And it was very well worthwhile.
I was just, to Mary Heather's point, I was just gonna say the finance committee got a preview of how Matt and Emily are breaking down the feedback, I think along the lines of what you're describing, Mary Heather, which is very much thematic, which is not easy to do, right? How do you take all of these open-ended responses? And what we had talked about was just not stacking that into this meeting and saving that for the next meeting, partly to give them more time, I think, to do that really thoughtfully, and also to give us more time for an engaged discussion about it.
I'm going to let Laura talk first.
Okay. One thing that I'm noticed as I read through this is that there are some factual misinformation in here that I think we also need to be careful to address as well.
Yes.
Because there's some stuff that I didn't realize that the community, at least some members of the community, thought was going on, like
Emily has a,
for instance.
yeah, Emily has she's added a budget page to the website, and so, you know, one of the things we'll talk about is kind of almost like a frequently asked questions, or, you know, just something on there that could be evolving based on some of the information we're getting and the conversations that we're having, just so that we have somewhere we can point people to, so that however they're feeling about the spending plan that we come up for FY26, it's not for lack of information, you know, that people are determining what to do.
Okay, I'm going to let Steve and then you go, Brian,
Okay,
okay?
that-
Only because you've gone.
No,
it's-
that's fine, that's
yeah.
fine, okay.
So I think this is a great first step. And at the conference we attended last week, we went to a session about community involvement in budget creation. And this is a step in that direction. It was Burlington or South Burlington? No, it was Burlington. It was Burlington was given the presentation, and they had consultants come in to try to get at this information. And one of the things that they said that should drive your budget is getting the resources to the kids that need it the most. And then it was also pointed out that some of the kids that need it the most are the least likely to, their families are the least likely to participate in these kind of activities. How does Burlington get to those people? And the answer was pretty grim. It's like the principals find the kids that are the poorest in the community or the ELLs, and they send a person to their house to do a survey with them, which is very expensive and very labor intensive. So I understand that the people that are showing up, the 5 people that showed up at this session and the 10 at that session, those are all great and valuable pieces of information. Those might not reflect all of the stakeholders here, and I would really like to see some effort put towards getting those voices involved. We hear plenty from the rich people. We hear plenty from the involved parents. We don't always hear from the people who are homeless or can't speak English or have such limitations on their time that they can't afford for their family to be at a meeting like that. So, not saying we need to do anything about it, just wanted to put that bug in everybody's ear.
Okay, Brian and then Suzanne.
Now, because I had to wait,
Sorry.
I had to listen to this guy down here telling you exactly what I was gonna say.
I'm sorry.
You feel like stealing the punchline today.
The point being is that, yes, 5 or 6 people give you their answers. Do not assume that the other 9,500 people that live in those communities go along with it. Weighted according to the numbers that you have. I mean, but, thanks, Steve.
Yeah, sure.
Suzanne.
I was just gonna say that, another place you find people is out walking, because I got cornered by somebody and I stood on a yellow line on Crown Point Road. Yes, I did. And had a lengthy conversation with several people, and at one point I had one truck on one side and a truck on the other, and I was having a conversation between the two of them. Yes, I was taking my afternoon walk. I did not plan on being pinned between 2 pickup trucks, but you never know where you will have these conversations.
I do think, one of the points that also came out of the presentation we attended last week was that, good, strong community engagement takes time.
Yeah.
It's something that evolves in a year-over-year process where, we're making a start here and we'll get more, and then next year we'll be better and broader, and, and I think as people begin to realize that it's safe to say what you think, and that there's somebody who's listening to you, and that there are, ways to have good, strong conversations at the beginning of a process that feel different, then I think, there's an opportunity for different viewpoints to come forward that maybe don't, maybe even make it to a ballot box, but are really important for our kids in terms of making sure we're doing good things. So, it's good work.
Okay. Well, thank you. And this went a little longer than we thought, but it was awesome.
Even without Matt.
Yeah, even without that. So we can't
I
blame
do
him.
have one question that came up, and if Matt is gonna be away for a bit here, how's this process gonna proceed?
Very well. Yeah.
Not that he is indispensable, but obviously it's a key time.
Yeah, we've worked together well, and with this in mind, in that respect. So, I think I'm learning that I'm not sure Matt is somebody who will be sitting at home indefinitely, just in his very nature. And I've certainly built a number of budgets in my day, many of them related to
I know you
AOE
can do it. I
expectations,
just
so.
bringing it up because we actually talked to him about that too.
Yeah,
At
yeah.
finance. At
Yeah.
that point, it was a little undecided.
Yes.
And up till this point, and maybe it's decided tonight, maybe it won't be.
Or maybe not. What we are definitely not doing is scheduling budgeting talk next board meeting, because that was actually the day that this baby was due. So we will, that's maybe a good time actually to just have some strategic plan thinking, that is around that provides that level, of guidance. Well, actually the 25th, so if this baby comes tonight, it's a little early, so we'll see, but we've got a plan that will go as babies go.
Yeah.
Yep, which better than anybody.
Sent a lot of people home at 11 o'clock at night too.
Oh, no. Okay, so let's move forward. Next is report of the chair. I do have just a couple things. First of all, it's my understanding that tonight, and I'm not sure he's listening to us, is Jim's last night. And I just wanted to thank you so much and wish you the very best as you pursue your new job. And, just a little token of our appreciation there, and, best wishes.
Oh, well, thank you. It's been lovely. I wish it were easier to go. I love Middlebury, and I wish you all the best going forward.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Thank you so
I know
much.
who's replacing me too. He's from another part of the state, community television, we're like hermit crabs.
Oh.
We're leaving you in capable hands.
Good to know. Thank you so much, Jim. Okay, next, I just also wanted to highlight that our next, when we were, during our executive committee meeting, we are talking about putting that VT education and funding report on the agenda, potentially for the next meeting. So we would hope that folks actually took a look and read it, so we can have some discussion around that. And the other thing that folks saw was an email from myself that we have identified the 9th of November as a retreat. And it's data that is very, takes a while to digest. We felt that it would be really hard to try to tack that on the end of a meeting or even in the evening. And so I'm hoping that folks can make it. I know Jason, I'm sorry, he has a hard commitment where he can't. But I think it's going to be a really important session as we're getting into, more detail of the budget, and we're really trying to focus on the outcomes of our kids and keep it focused around our kids.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other thing, yes?
Suzanne has
So,
Suzanne.
two things that you forgot about that. One, 7:45 that morning, breakfast will be served. We'll start at 8 and go to 11, and all you have to do is bring yourselves.
Yes,
That's
yes.
in the email, right?
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
in the email, yeah, and that's why I didn't say the whole thing.
Where is it?
And it is, to be determined.
Probably here.
Probably here. Have to make sure that this is a secure space for us. That was my one question that I had. The other thing, the executive committee, we're actually meeting tomorrow, and we are going to be working on the next phase of the superintendent's evaluation. And one thing I wanted to highlight, that as a committee, we really want to involve all of you. And so we're going to be working on that process tomorrow night. Okay? And last but not least is board meeting location. So at this point, being that this is almost November 1st, and we have not been able to really come up with a plan around that, I think at this point the plan is to really stick with having our meetings here, but look for opportunities such as the other night, where we're getting into our schools in a very meaningful way. Next year, when we start the school year out, hopefully we'll have time to think about it a little bit of, what we want this to be, for the next school year. But for this year, I think we're better, because at this point, it would be hard pressed to get to every school,
Well, but there's also a real, equipment and finance.
Yes, yeah.
Which won't necessarily be
Go
solved
away
by next year.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Wendy. Thank you so much for really going out of your way to involve the board in some of the district's outreach opportunities. It was really great that we were able to attend these budget listening sessions, and that was part of your planning process from the ground up has been really wonderful. So thank you for really working with us to meet those goals, and we appreciate it.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
There'll be more to come.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, and Barb, just to follow up on that, and Brian will remember this too. So Brian and I were at Shoreham together on the 22nd.
On different ends of the table,
We
right?
were like just, yeah, kind of
A sandwich.
we were sandwiching the community members, but some of the feedback we got from folks who attended there were, they would like to see the board at some of their regular events, and in fact, it would probably be more meaningful to them to have board members come to their, regular traditional events, and not necessarily, it's not necessarily going to, replace the opportunity for folks to, engage with several board members, but, I think some of the opportunities that we can take, while we're having our board meetings here on a regular basis, is to come up with kind of sign-up lists
Yeah.
for these kind of activities.
Didn't they
for-
want us to cook for an event?
They wanted us to come to the Thanksgiving.
That's right.
Oh, that's cool.
Thing, which is, something they've been doing for a long time, and that's probably their highest attended event.
Yeah, that's a
in
great
terms of the
idea.
community members who come. So, so I think, the CNE committee can probably create a sign-up sheet like we had done for the PTO tour, and just continue to do that in lieu of, having regular board meetings at our different community schools.
And there are community meetings that are beginning to happen for different types of reasons.
Yeah.
Joanna was at the meeting at Ripton, there's a
Shoreham.
special community meeting in Shoreham, because Shoreham doesn't have as much of an active PTO, so, and I think, if I didn't think you'd be comfortable in the environment, I'd let you know that, but I think coming along with me is okay, and the more of that we can do, the better, You also helped me understand what was important to take out of something too, from a contextual standpoint, which I'm still learning, so it's helpful.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so moving onward to report of the board, and we'll just go through the list and report out any updates that you might have. And if in fact you don't have an update, it's fine to say that as well. First, we'll start with Community and Engagement Committee.
Woohoo. Should be communication, but yes.
Oh, gosh.
All good. It's a C, and yes.
Yes.
So, first of all, thank you to everyone who was able to attend the sessions on the 22nd. Really appreciate it. I unfortunately wasn't able to attend one, but it sounds like those who were able to go really had a positive experience and got some great things out of it. So, thanks across the board. On the district website, if you poke around, you may notice a new page, the Who Do I Contact page. That's what Emily Blistein and the CNE committee has been working on to try and clarify for the community who they should contact for various school and district related questions and issues. So do kind of check that out and see what you think. We're open to some feedback.
It's in progress too.
It's in progress,
So, it's
right?
just-
Which is
this
why, like,
draft one. There's more coming to it.
which is why I say check it out
Yeah.
and let us know feedback, because it's not the final format. As part of that, there is an all-board email that's being assigned, and the Communications and Engagement Committee is working on the procedure to go along with that. We will let you know when that really starts moving forward, because you will start getting random emails in your your school board account, and we'll let you know what to do or not do with them. And then student reps, I'm hoping I need to connect with both of them, but we're hoping to work with Sophia and Nava to come up with a plan to incorporate the elementary school students and schools to get some of their feedback and representation for the board. So I need to talk to them, but that's coming up, I'm sure. And yeah, we're doing some fun stuff, and we'll be diving in. I need to talk to you at some point, Dr. Baker, as well as the Finance Committee, about CNE efforts for budget communication.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
Next is the Facilities Committee.
The Facilities Committee met on the 16th. We took a first look at the RFP to get work underway for Phase 1, Part 1, Middlebury Schools Facilities Master Planning and Capital Improvement Planning. Still a work in progress. We also reviewed 2 easement requests from Maple Broadband, one for Middlebury, one for Ripton, both on district land. The Middlebury land is leased to the town of Middlebury. The Ripton land is the land of the site of the Ripton Elementary School. The Middlebury easement request has gone through the select board, been approved by the select board, and so at a future meeting we will need to review and approve that easement request. The Ripton one is still a work in progress. It has not been really flushed out. They got us a updated proposal. Facilities committee will review it and most likely solicit feedback from the Ripton community, because it is not going to be a small or unobtrusive piece of equipment and structure around it. So we will want feedback and buy-in for that before we approve any of that stuff. So that's it. Questions?
Is there any money involved in that?
No.
They're just asking for the easement, they're not giving any?
No, they have sort of a set fee that they have paid other towns and districts for the, whatever it is, 15 or 20 by 30 plot of land for the easement for that. So okay, it's a few $1,000s or something. I don't know. It's not. All to be discussed if we want to discuss.
It's not the money, it's that it's our land and they have to approach us if they want to use it.
Yeah, exactly. And we don't have to let them use it if we don't want to. But
Yeah.
Okay, next is Finance Committee.
Yeah, I mean, you've heard pretty much what we're doing.
Policy Committee.
We're still working on C30 and class size policy. D6. And that's what we've been doing. You know, and the board, you know, directed us to this a few weeks ago. At some point, I should follow up with somebody about what you think is a good date for that, for us to have some good feedback, like hard feedback from you. I think we're getting closer to that. We had a meeting on Tuesday. We have another one next Tuesday, but I've heard a couple different things about like, well, February is a thing, but that means we have to figure out some stuff far in advance of that. So like, when is that exactly? So at some point, maybe I can talk to you about when that would be. Other than that, we're still working on those 3 policies.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, moving to negotiations. I'm not sure you maybe.
The only thing, we got the final copy of the support staff agreement. I need to sign that tomorrow, and Chris needs to sign that tomorrow, and then we are done with negotiations. But the tentatives are signed. I mean, this is clearly a formality. So.
Excellent. Thank you. Addison Central CPAC update, Joanna and Suzanne.
The CPAC has 2 events coming up. One is its annual meeting on Tuesday, October 29th. It's going to be here from 6 to 7:30. The next is a community event titled Special Ed 101, What Is It and How It Works? And it's Tuesday, November 12th from 6 to 7:30 also at the library, and both have a virtual option to attend.
The first one you mentioned is tomorrow.
Yeah, that is tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. Hannaford Career Center, and that's Tricia and Steve.
We successfully filed our audit for the previous year, which was, well, you'd have to read the audit. I'm not going to go into that here. So that was pretty big. It did result in a personnel change because of it. And other than that, they're pretty desperate for some transportation stuff. But we got a grant, $80,000 to buy 2 vans. So that is relieving that pressure a little bit. So the grant writer is definitely earning his keep. $500,000 last year, and all this other stuff. So that is going well. And we're in the same spot in the budget as you guys are. We don't know yet. So.
Okay.
I have a
Mary
question.
Heather.
Yeah.
Okay, so the audit was for fiscal year
No, not the one was it the one we just finished?
Yeah. Spring.
Yeah, I want to get because I want to say 23-24.
Right.
Is that
so
right?
fiscal year
I feel
24
like
is academic year 23.
This is one that's
Yeah.
longer than
Okay.
they expected it to be.
Yes.
I just want to make sure I'm taking the notes correctly. And then secondly, we usually receive a presentation from, when are we expecting that?
Right.
They're still working on.
Yeah,
There's
down the road.
That's down the road ways.
Yeah.
So.
I
Do they
do
have
know our financial office, it connects with them, so,
Yeah.
you know, in terms of planning. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's, as much as anyone knows anything, we're trying to know the same things together at the same time, because, you know,
Right.
it has its largest impact with us.
And it's
I'm
awkward.
trying to remember whether it was November or December last year.
I don't remember beginning of December last year.
This is your
Yeah,
December.
it's awkward because they can't do their budget until they hear what the enrollment
Yep,
is.
yep.
So it's a different finance model, and some of it depends on what we tell them.
Yep.
And so it's almost like dealing with the legislature. You know, things change so frequently, and they're trying to coordinate 3 different school districts to do a budget. So it's not going to go faster.
Okay, VSBA regional update. Suzanne, anything to add? Or to share?
So VSBA and the VSA did their joint conference Thursday afternoon and Friday. VSBA was hoping that they could get, well, they set their sights really high, as they've done for the last couple of years. They wanted 400 board members to attend, and they only ended up with 100, but that was up from 90 last year. So they're increasing. We had a great afternoon of student exhibits and presentations on Friday afternoon, as well as a presentation on budgeting. We had an amazing speaker to start the morning on Friday, and his name was Julio Delgado. And man, we could get him for opening of next year, he would be amazing, but might be a pipe dream. And we had some kids there on Thursday evening that were amazing as well. They had robotics and poetry and singers and just amazing. So it was a great day and a half, you might say, and then so now we move on to, we have our next board meeting November 13th in Montpelier, and I think that's our last one in person until after the winter season.
Thank you, Suzanne. It was a really great conference, I thought, very well put together and utilized the time well, I thought. So in the future, I know it's hard because folks work and that kind of thing, but really encourage you and it's nice to just sit down and meet people on other boards and network and, hear what they're doing as well. So, Middlebury Community TV, I missed the last meeting because I was flying home from Europe, but my main update was Jib. I found out about that, so we did have an update on that. Parks and Recreation.
I don't have anything to report for them because they don't meet on a regular basis. But I do have a question for you all, and this came up actually. It was prompted by something that was brought to my attention during the Shoreham meeting, which is that I think there is a lease agreement between ACSD and Shoreham, and the lease is up.
Oh.
And apparently the lease is with the old Shoreham board, like the original Shoreham board before reunification. So it's something that I will touch base with you separately,
Yeah.
but it brought to mind, I believe this is something that has happened before with the lease agreement that we have with Parks and Rec for the recreational fields next to Mary Hogan. That is ACSD land. Parks and Rec leases that, and I don't know that lease is up to date either. So it's something that I think we should probably chase down and just make sure that we're up and up with that. So I'm just informing you. I'll
That's a good point.
do some work to figure that out. Because otherwise our involvement with the Parks and Rec board, if you will, it's just kind of, it's not a typical arrangement like with NCTV and Career Center.
Yeah.
there's not really any power.
Right.
There's no meetings.
It's, yeah, and there are no meetings, and
Yeah.
Parks and Recreation went through a reorganization a
Exactly.
few years ago, and so they're actually, in the org chart organized underneath Public Works.
Exactly.
So,
So it's not really an independent board like it used to be.
Right.
So anyway, but nonetheless, I'll get working on some stuff for them.
Didn't Dustin head that up, and he's now at Mom's?
He's at Mom's.
So he had been the director of Parks and Rec.
Exactly.
He's over at Mom's now, and Scott Bourne, who was the assistant director of
Yeah.
Parks and Rec, stepped
He's now
up.
the director.
Is now the director.
They lost somebody who had been there for, I think, a number of years.
So Dustin had been there. I believe he started working there. His teams. He'd been
Yeah,
there for a very
exactly.
long time.
Yeah.
That being said, though, Scott had also been working there for several years, so
Okay, good.
it was a pretty
Yep.
smooth transition. And then Amber Hunt is now the assistant director.
Is that his wife?
That's Dustin's wife.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
She had also been the lead for Camp Cucamonga and various other Parks and Rec things. So, as far as the department seems to still be in good hands.
Okay. Next is our second public comments period. And as our normal practice is that we limit it to 3 minutes. Is there anyone in the room that would like to make a public comment? And do we have anyone online?
Before you pick on Mary, it appears that we have a false alarm.
Okay.
So
Oh,
everybody's
no.
doing well.
Yeah.
You know. It seems doubtful we'll have a baby tonight.
Okay.
Well, this is in the public interest. So.
Yes.
We
didn't
violate
any
I just suggest he doesn't need to come back tonight.
Sure we can. I know my mind had to change.
She's gonna be thrilled.
That was
It's
the
all being
most,
broadcast.
honestly,
Yes, I'm sure.
for my 6 years of chair, that was the most tension producing when I had to be here and run a meeting and having that happen. I never did schedule anything those days, but honestly, as a.
But you
Can't
can't
it was just
schedule.
hard.
Yeah.
Okay,
Can
so
relate from both ends, both sides.
is there, okay.
In
Go ahead, Mary.
Mary Slozer, I'm gonna start my timer.
Thank you.
A couple notes on just what the discussion was tonight. I know I wasn't asked, but I had a couple things that I would like to see. And they relate to investments in the future, which I think is not something you're gonna hear from community members who aren't following everything that you're doing. But in particular, what is the district doing to address staffing shortages and what kinds of investments are being made to make sure we have people to fill the positions you're budgeting? What are we doing to move forward towards UDL? And what are we doing to, Steve and Brian's point, what kind of investments can this district make to proactively engage those less represented community members? That doesn't just happen. You have to like make a plan and put money and effort and labor into actually bringing them into the fold. So those are some things I would love to see discussed and explicitly addressed in our budgets moving forward. I'm sure others would too if they knew more about it. One thing I wanted to just make a request of administration, this is not at all trying to call out Matt because I know he's got no intention behind this, but it's interesting to me that it's been called out repeatedly that student service, only 42% of student services budget is covered by offsetting revenue. That has not been mentioned about any of the other cost centers. And that just ties into this offensive and ongoing dangerous narrative that special education in particular is an unfunded mandate. It is not. All of this education activity that we're doing, if you want, is an unfunded mandate. So just a caution that that kind of language and those numbers reinforce that narrative that I don't think is fair. I wanted to also make a point. There was some call out about the mental health needs, and that ties back to Nicole's presentation last week. again, I'm so glad Nicole was drawing attention to that, but I think there's part of maybe a misconception that mental health and special education go together. Mental health is a much bigger issue, and the services that we need to be providing go way beyond way beyond special education. I think it's important also to think about what we're budgeting and what's actually happening in the schools, like how many positions we have vacant, how much access our students have to counseling services that they need. There's some imbalance between what we wish was happening and what is actually happening, and we need to figure that out. Finally, on IB, I'm gonna run out of time, but I think to Mary Heather's point and what Chip was trying to say and what what you all were saying, there's a bigger thing here, and people are not satisfied or interested in saying this is the fee we pay. That's not what anybody says when they say what's the cost of IB. That's not what they mean. They're talking about the broader costs, the pros and the cons, the consequences. What PD is sacrificed because our teachers have to go to IB PD? What AP classes are missing? What other like lower level classes are not offered to high school students? Things of that nature. And so I think that's what the community really needs to hear. Caitlin does a great job making the explanation about the common curriculum, and that really is amazing. I wish more people could hear what she has to say. But that only answers part of the question. It's what else are we sacrificing? And maybe it does turn out that the balance is for IB, but that's what the community doesn't understand. Thanks. Sorry, I went over.
Can I follow that up?
No,
It's
not,
coming.
not at this point. We have an agenda item later.
There is a spot.
There is a spot, but not,
All right,
okay. Okay.
We jumped over executive session for public comment.
No.
No,
We
that's
didn't.
next.
No,
Executive session is next.
executive session
Yes.
is next
Oh,
after
okay.
public
Sorry.
comment.
Yes.
I was reading it incorrectly.
Sorry. And I don't think there was anyone online.
There was
There
Okay.
was
There
one
was,
person.
I
Okay.
just don't think they raised their hand.
Okay, great. So next on our agenda is an executive session, and it's an update on board member conduct per 1 VSA section 313A3. Could I have a motion?
I'll move that we go into executive session for board member conduct per one VSA section 313A3.
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we need to take a